So you guys have probably heard of a land acknowledgement. This is a fault acknowledgement. If I ever became good at doing the bouncing job, it's because I had made a lot of mistakes over time. And this is going to be a story that features some of my mistakes, because this is a story from my very early career. This is doing punk rock security for my buddy's small independent punk rock promotion. If I ever come off like a tough guy, if I ever come off like like I'm trying to portray myself as a badass, please come back and review this story. This is going to be, some less flattering tales of my early career. What did I love about punk? Punk was the first kind of music that you discover that your parents didn't introduce you to is always, I think, very special. And for me, that was like punk and ska punk, that kind of hybrid kind of music. That came in really, really handy when I was in Toronto, because people would ask me what kind of music I liked, and I'd say ska. And they wouldn't be thinking kind of like a dorky banana suit dude, white boy shit. They were thinking like the Jamaican gangsters listen to. Those, okay, awesome. So it was like, less embarrassing than it could have been, thanks to that little, that little cultural overlap. I earned a reputation, again, because I grew up wrestling. If you take a guy down not on a mat, the fight's over in a lot of cases. If you can control a guy's body, you can throw him downstairs, you can grab his head and smash. There's just a lot of nasty things can happen if you know how to manipulate a guy's body and there's objects around or surfaces. So I got kind of a reputation for, being able to handle myself at these shows. I had a big mouth. I was certainly not going to back down from anybody verbally. And that, again, caused situations that might have been avoided had I been a little humbler. But it was what it was, and I thankfully physically and had the tools to deal with the situations that my mouth got me into. There was a situation where a touring hardcore band was running down the Sex Pistols, and my friend, who was a Sex Pistols fan, started chirping them. So they threatened to beat him up from the stage, and I stood behind my buddy and was like, "Mama," it's like started calling them on. And they got really scared, and they didn't attack my buddy, but it was that kind of thing. We hung out at one of our friends, or a couple of our friends kind of got together, and they had they pooled their welfare money and their kind of low end job money and rented a house in kind of the slums. And this was not just in the slums. This was like between the low income housing in the city and the bars. So you're guaranteed to have, like, all the worst people are going to walk by your house at 3 a.m, like a few times a week based in this location.
When you hear, the other side of the tracks,
Yep.
This is the other side of the tracks.
Yeah, and there's tracks. Like the GO train line runs through there, and there's a disproportionate number of bums in the city that have like missing limbs because they just tried to make it home and they ended up on the tracks, and nature, they got Darwined a little bit.
Darwined a little bit.
There's a little bit Darwined. They still might reproduce, but they're diminished. It's funny because one of the tougher dealers downtown was a guy who had lost both legs to going home one night and falling asleep on the tracks. But he was tough, and what he'd do is he'd get like a little hill. He'd wait for you like to where there was a little, there's like slope. There's like a very hilly downtown area. And he'd get to where you could get some momentum going downhill, and then he'd kneecap the guy with like a little club. So everybody was terrified of him, but it just looked ridiculous because he had no legs. Anyway, so don't let anyone tell you can't be your own enforcer just because you're,
Just because you don't have all your body parts.
Just because you fell asleep on the tracks. tracks. You know, see, I had really good representation growing up. People talk about representation being important. Like, come on, the scary drug enforcer downtown had no legs. That's like, you'd think that was an affirmative action, but he earned it. He had true grit and an understanding of like building up a little momentum on a hill. Now, at this punk house, the prime entertainment, aside from watching the zombies stumble home and seeing who was going to pass out on the tracks or whatever, because these guys, they had a kegger every weekend. It was like never-ending kegger. And anyone was invited. You go in and you just, you pay your $10 and you can hang out and, see local punk bands or, any punk bands that were coming through would sometimes play impromptu shows there. And we called it Stab House. Because at one point, this kind of like crust punk band from the States was staying there, and they were out front for a smoke, and they were drinking. And some people came by from, walking home from the bar, and they didn't like the guys, how they were dressed. And they made some comments, and one of the punk guys wasn't having it, and there was a stabbing. So that's how it got christened Stab House from that day. Oh, so we got Stab House. One of the primary entertainments that we would do is a prank call contest. My buddy had the best prank calls ever. He would just he would terrorize a local clown service. There was the Great Kazoo Clown Service, and he would call them every weekend for a period of years. And this is back when you had like an answering machine with like tape that could fill up, and he's like leaving on their work machine just minutes and minutes of like tape, like, hello, Kazoo Clown Service. Yes, I have an unorthodox request. You see, my group of professionals would like to have anal sex with one of your clowns. Now, we have a coupon that for a night of free clown service, and we understand this is a little bit above and beyond what the coupon would offer. So we're going to offer you $40 an hour, and we've arranged our genitalia from largest to smallest, so you can either just work your way up or just get it the worst of it over with and just have an easier night. Whatever they choose. A boy or a girl clown, we don't care as long as they have an anus, There's another call that he sometimes would do. Would be, hey, Kazoo Clown Service, yeah. Like I'm trying to run a meeting here of good Christian folks. You sent me an N-word clown. Now, when you put white makeup on a black face, what does that make gray? You gonna send me a gray clown? I'm trying to run a Ku Klux Klan meeting here, and you people are not helping. Another thing you like to do is call up and just do Christopher Walken for hello, Kazoo. And it got bad enough at one point they changed the name of their. I don't know if this is specific to these calls, but I assume they're related. They changed their name in the Yellow Pages. They changed the name of their business to another name. And, being just a frickin' paper terrorist, my friend noticed that the phone number was still the same. So we went through the clown listings and found the same phone number related to the frickin' thing.
It's like Rain Man level stuff.
Yes. Well, this is a small town. It's not a long list of clown services.
Still. Looking through the Yellow Pages, and if you're like 15 years old, ask their parents what the Yellow Pages are. Yeah. Just zeroing in on those two phone numbers are the same in a phone book. That's some level of on the spectrum.
Well, and then he calls them up. They're like, hello, Kazoo. You thought you could escape me, changing your name to the Great Clown Service. My phone, I was more like calling 24-hour businesses. That was more kind of my shtick. Like I call up 24-hour locksmith, and I just was trying to see how horrible a situation could get before he wouldn't deal with it. Hey, now, Mr. Locksmith. Okay, I got a little situation. The wife and I had, we've been married some time, and we got to keep the fire going. So we were doing some unusual things with the headboard, and there were some locks attached. Now the darn locks won't come unlocked. Is that something you could help me with? Okay, good. Now let's say, it's my wife might be a little bit on the younger side. Like not real young, but young enough that it might look a little strange that she's my wife tied to the bed. Okay, that's okay. That's all right. Now let's say, she ain't dead. She ain't dead. She's still kicking a little bit, but there's some notice. There's not the prime of life no more. Is what I'm trying to say. That's. And again, anyway, because we were calling from this punk house that was having regular parties and just left their phone out, it was impossible to track who was who was doing these pranks. So we had a lot of fun at other people's expense.
The cops show up. Who made these crank calls? We all have blackouts regularly. You expect us to keep track of what we all do during our blackouts?
Now, I'll go back to what was I doing when I wasn't doing this? Well, I was bouncing my buddies' punk shows. I might have been a little more heavy-handed than I needed to be in the early days. One group that I really didn't get along with was the local Sharps. This is the Skinheads Against Racial Prejudice. And again, when you're dealing with you fascists, more or less what's going to piss them off. These guys is very random. It's very hard to predict what might piss them off. They showed up to a show that we were running that was a salute to British people, and they were furious, and they ripped the Union Jack off the promoter's battle jacket and screamed, "This is a tribute to imperialism."
No fucking shit.
And we had to and I walk up to him and I'm like, "I didn't know you liked slavery that much." He's like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Hey, you know who stamped out the international slave trade? It's the British Empire. So you guys can stand on the side of slavery." Anyway, I didn't like these guys. And it was a real problem with these idiots. So but it was clear that I was going to, they didn't want to fight me. Thank God. They knew there was, I might be kind of bad for them. And again, sometimes we'd do oi shows, and there'd be bands that would be less enlightened, I guess would be a nice way to put it. And if it was going to be a kind of sharpier crowd, I couldn't let some of their fans in that had more provocative patches. So 3 of these kind of idiots start drinking in the parking lot. And the last thing I need is these guys drinking in the fucking parking lot, because that's going to bring the cops. The cops are going to see, underage drinking. So I go over to these 3 skinheads. And I say, "Guys, you can drink wherever you want, but not on the property, okay?" And, their leader rushes me, and I kind of knock him down. And then I come up and I've got his ankle in a lock. And I say to his buddies, because they're going to rush me too, I say, "Stay where you are, or I'm going to fucking snap his ankle." And they kept moving forward, so I snapped his ankle and I moved to fight them. And they heard the sound of the guy's ankle freaking going. I didn't break any bone, but I kind of twisted it the wrong way, and it was a gross sound. It was like, gross anyway. That was, they kind of, when they heard that sound, it got way too real for them, and they were just like, "Oh shit," and they just kind of picked their buddy up and left. And, "Holy shit, man, what the fuck?" So that was unfortunate. Again, I don't want to try to sound like I'm Mr. Tough Guy. There was a night where I knocked myself out. It was another one of these kind of sketchy oi shows. And there was tension in the air. There was beef between different groups that were there. And I only had a couple of guards with me, just me and 2 other guys working the show. So I was up at the back. They had kind of this bar we were working, had a pool table area up top that was kind of raised a little bit. And what I didn't realize is the ceiling kind of wasn't raised. Like it was raised on that floor, but it kind of went down further. So I'm looking, and I see a fight break out, and I say, okay, I'm gonna run. I'm gonna jump off the railing and land on the guys fighting like freaking WWF style. And people are gonna see that, and they're gonna be so intimidated that it's gonna, that there won't be any problems. And I launch myself headfirst right into the roof of this freaking establishment. To this day, I've got a dent in my head. That is still there as a reminder of fucking, as a reminder of my early 20s and some of the mistakes that I made. But all was well, right? People they heard the big crash and they saw me on the floor and they said, okay, look, whoever laid out that big guy, we don't want anything to do with him. And everybody kind of behaved after that. So now, come to kind of the pièce de résistance story. And this isn't the funniest part. It's maybe not the most interesting part, but it should be, because I had a very, very low odds of surviving this situation. Your odds of surviving a knife attack are about 1 in 3. And there was a situation, there was a guy dealing in the show. We had to remove him. He whipped the knife out, and thank God he didn't just start stabbing. He menaced me with the fucking thing first, and that gave me an opportunity to grab a stool and just smash him with it. And that was just, so thank God that was there. Your odds are not, stool or no stool, your odds are not great at surviving a knife attack, and I was able to, at the pinnacle of this freaking stuff, survived. I survived 2 other knife attacks. One because I pulled some dog spray out, and one because my buddy came in with the guy was lives near a wall. We were kicking the guy out, and the guy pulled the knife, and my buddy came in from the side and kicked his hand against the stone wall. And I don't know how bad the guy's hand was hurt, but we heard some bad noises, and he couldn't hold the knife anymore. So, and we went down to Moise's office, and we stuck the knife in his desk, and we said, "You need to have a talk with your searchers, because that got in your door tonight, buddy." And that was many years later. So that was kind of the play. But I really loved working with this scene. I had a lot of fun. I worked with bands like the Bar Mitzvah Brothers that aren't super famous, but are niche famous. If you Google them, you'll find some kind of cool stuff. They're more a polka band, if anything else, but they're really unique sound. I got to work with Flashlight Brown very early in their career. They're, if there's a band that, got famous, especially they're big in Japan. As cliche as that is to say, and a few others that were, went on to prominence. But that was early, very early on. But, I had fun. That set me up to thinking I could bounce in Toronto. And it's kind of like when you think you can drive in Toronto. When, I'm driving in a small city. I'm driving in the hinterland. It's fine. And you come to Toronto thinking you'll be able to drive, and it's a learning curve. Mm-hmm. So
it's the big league.
Yeah, exactly. So at next, I'll tell you some other stories about my my career. But this is early on, lest anyone accuse me of not sharing warts and all my history. This is hopefully humanized me a little bit, and let you know that if I did it right later, it's because I did wrong at first.